Australia's National Rugby League, or NRL, has been one of the most watched and most profitable sports in Australia for over 100 years now. And while it has grown in popularity in the Pacific region, the UK, and other parts of the world, one country has always been seen as the ultimate prize for the sport: the United States of America. Years in the making, the major experiment by the NRL to expand the game into the very lucrative US market was held over last weekend. And while many are hailing the first of a 5-year commitment a success, allegations of racism on the field have dominated the headlines.
Sam, I'm looking forward to you explaining why we're talking about NRL and Vegas in the same sentence.
No, you love a sports explainer.
I don't know sports, but I do know that I don't think those two things are meant to be in the same sentence. Before we get to that explainer, though, all of the headlines over the weekend were about one incident.
Yeah.
And that was an incident of alleged racism. Can you just take me through what happened before we get into the Vegas story?
Racism and Australian sport have a long, unpleasant history, and this does look to be another chapter in that. I want to say up front that the NRL judiciary is conducting their official investigation into this incident, so there's not a lot that we can confirm 100%. But the allegation at the moment is from a Broncos player whose name is Ezra Mam. He is a Torres Strait Islander man, and he has claimed that Roosters forward Spencer Leniu called him a racist name in the middle of the second half of the Roosters vs Broncos game in Las Vegas over the weekend. Now, you can hear in the television broadcast Mam making the complaint to the referee on the field, and then one of his teammates repeating the claim. You then hear the referee calling over the captains of both sides and informing them that he's referring the incident for further investigation to the judiciary. Now, straight after the game, journalists come onto the field and get to interview players, and one of them, a Triple M radio reporter, asked Leniu about the incident. Here's what he said.
Obviously, great result, but I've got to ask about what happened in the second half, the racial complaint. Can you tell us from your view what happened?
Nah, nothing. It's just all fun and games on the field, and that's it.
You're not too worried?
Not worried at all.
So after that, we typically hear from both captains and coaches of the sides. Here's what Broncos coach Kevin Walters told media when asked whether Mam was certain he heard a racist slur.
I haven't had a good chance to... Well, actually, no. Oh, yeah, he's adamant that... But yeah, we'll leave it with the NRL. They're looking at it, so I won't make any more comment on it, except that we're supporting our player, and rightly so.
And then when we heard from the Roosters coach and captain, they didn't have much to say.
I've heard of it like you guys have, so there's no comment from me about it because I can't have any opinion on it. I don't know what happened.
There was a particularly poignant moment in the commentary on Nine when retired NRL legend and First Nations person Jonathan Thurston said this.
Get a little bit emotional about it, that in this day and age that one of our players would be allegedly saying what he said. So after coming here, 40,000 people, two massive cracking games, and now we're dealing with this. We just didn't need it after round one.
Then there was a bit of a development overnight when there were reports of a confrontation in the corridors of the team hotel. Now, both teams are actually staying at the same hotel between some of the players involved in this incident. It is all getting quite nasty, and it's definitely going to be a closely watched case at the NRL judiciary this week.
Definitely keep us updated on that. Obviously, we have to wait for the NRL judiciary to hand down its decision as to what happened, and we won't speculate any further. But I did think it was important to cover that first off the bat. I do want to turn now to why exactly the NRL was playing games in Vegas to begin with. Like, why were they there?
It is about the money. Mm-hmm. And
can you explain that?
I guess by hosting the first round of the NRL season in the US, they hoped that matches could attract this entirely new audience of Americans.
But just to clarify, so when we talk about the NRL, for those people that are perhaps sport adjacent like I am, we're talking about an Australian game that is being played overseas and broadcast overseas.
Exactly. So the National Rugby League is predominantly made up of Australian teams. There's one team from New Zealand. And these matches should have been played in Sydney, Brisbane, and other Australian cities. Instead, the NRL made this decision to play the first round, 2 matches of the first round, in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I guess you have to really remember here just how lucrative the US sports market is. Mm-hmm. So it's worth about $80 billion US dollars a year.
So many zeros.
And Australian codes are always thinking about how to get a piece of that pie, whether it's cricket, exploring, and domestic competition. The AFL has thought about how to expand into America. There's constantly projects on the go. And the reason why really is that everything is bigger in the US. I mean, there's 330 million people. The TV broadcast deals are bigger. There's more merchandise on sale. And of course, there's gambling dollars now. So with all of that being dangled in front of them, the NRL signed a 5-year contract with Allegiant Stadium, and that's the stadium where the games will be hosted in Vegas. So we've just had the first year of a 5-year deal.
And so it's only the first round that will be played there.
It's only the first round.
But it will be played there next year as well.
2 games of the first round.
Okay.
So there's normally about 8 games around, 2 games of the first round, and they say they're going to rotate which 4 teams travel to the US every year. But many in the game are saying this is the biggest development in the game since State of Origin football, which is when New South Wales plays Queensland 3 times a year. And that started in the 80s.
So a long time between innovations.
Yeah, it's a huge innovation. I do want to stay on the gambling aspect of this for a moment, because it certainly isn't by accident that the NRL has picked the gambling capital of the world for this experiment.
Vegas.
Sports betting in the US is on the rise after a number of legislative changes. So gambling in casinos has always been part of America. Sports betting is relatively new. And now sports betting revenues have actually gone up 45% in a single year as more and more states allow it to be permissible. The Super Bowl, which was only a couple of weeks ago in the same city, actually, it was in Vegas. That saw about $23 billion US dollars gambled on a single game.
You've highlighted 2 different elements there. There's this idea of like spreading the game and innovating and getting it in front of as many people as possible. But there's also the very real reality of wanting to make as much money for the code as possible.
Yeah.
Which one is it? Why did they do it? Or is it both?
I'm sure there's different ways that different people in the game are perceiving this move, but we only have to look to the comments from Peter V'landys, who's the boss of the NRL, and he said after the game on Sunday, if we can make it here, it'll be worth tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for the game. So money is clearly at the forefront of their mind. And the NRL did not hold back. They really wanted to win Americans over. A few weeks before the weekend, they even released a video trailer explaining the rules of the game, voiced by Russell Crowe.
Rugby league is football, but maybe not as you know it.
One quick other thing to mention, it wasn't just American fans in the stadium. There were thousands of Australian NRL fans who made the trip over to Vegas to watch the games.
So then is that considered a success? If you're just migrating audiences that are the same audiences to different places and making them pay thousands of dollars for airfares to watch something they could have watched at home, is that a success?
Spoken like a true sports fan, Zara. I mean, this is really the question that's on everyone's lips now, and every expert is trying to evaluate whether this massive experiment was pulled off. Now, according to the NRL, and you're not going to be surprised by this, they say it was a huge success.
Shocking.
Yeah, so they say that it's part of a 5-year plan. This is the first of 5 years. And Peter V'landys also said it's not going to happen in the first 12 months or first 2 years. We've set ourselves a goal over 5. This is the start. This is the foundation. We now have to build the house. But it didn't go perfectly. I mean, yes, we talked all about that racism incident at the beginning of the episode, but there was also some other issues. I mean, the NRL says there were 40,000 people in the stadium, but some commentators and journalists in the stadium cast some doubt over that number based on how many empty seats there were. There was also talk throughout the week of a huge number of tickets being given away for free. And then there was this hiccup with the broadcast on Fox Sports 1, which is the most watched sports channel in the US. If you're on Fox Sports 1, you are going to be watched by millions. But a college basketball game that was broadcast before the NRL was meant to start went into overtime, and that meant that viewers actually missed the first 10 minutes of the NRL, which at that scale actually is significant. But despite all of that, I do think there were a lot of Americans who enjoyed watching the game. There was a couple of NFL players there, one whose name is DeMarcus Robinson. He told the ABC on Sunday, "It was amazing to me. What a wonderful performance. It's definitely way more brutal than the NFL for sure. These guys have no pads on."
There you go. Sam, you're a big sports fan and a close observer of the business of sport too. Do you think that this was a success? And could it be replicated by other codes?
Oh, it definitely could be replicated by other codes. I think that the NRL have really paved the way and started to build a bit of a playbook for how do codes from around the world, not just Australia, expand into the mecca of sports business, which is the US. I don't think it was the hole-in-one that the NRL wanted, and I think that there's lots of room for them to improve and to make more money over the next 4 years. I think they've done the right thing by signing a 5-year deal, so they didn't have to nail it in year one. But I do think we have to focus on this racism allegation that's playing out at the moment. It's a really significant issue in sport, and it's one that we need to talk about.
We absolutely do. And if any part of this episode has raised any issues with you, you can contact 13 Yarn for help on 13 92 76. We've also mentioned gambling throughout this episode, so if you are needing to seek help for gambling, you can reach out on 1800 858 858.